What's a subtle sign that someone had a rough childhood? Story 1. My sister-in-law adopted 3 siblings who are completely self-sustainable at a very young age. They were visiting and noticed a lot. If I gave anything to the oldest boy, he would pass it off to the younger sister. Then I'd give him another and it went to the middle sister. Then I'd give him another and he'd finally keep it for himself. I asked if they wanted water. He said yes, and I asked if the girls wanted water too. Oh, we can all share this one. Obviously, I gave them all water, but that one hit me pretty hard. He knew their eating schedules and would nag my sister-in-law, offered to make them mac and cheese or noodles or whatever we had laying around, promised to clean up after. When quote-unquote normal kids play video games, they're glued. This kid was constantly checking over his shoulder to make sure everyone was safe, and if he felt one of his sisters was up to no good, he would put the controller down even if it meant dying or losing his progress in the game. To elaborate upon up to no good, what the oldest brother considered bad behavior was pretty innocuous. There were several instances of things I consider normal childish behavior that he would regularly put a stop to. The most outstanding one was being too loud. It wouldn't even be yelling or screaming, just typical 5-year-old make-believe noises that would cause him to run over and tell the little one to keep it down. He was 12 years old. Come to think of it, the things other kids go through is unreal. When I was 12, my problems were, what to eat? Why are you guys noobs? Where's my other sock? I was just lucky. Story 2. From the horse's mouth, people-pleasing behaviors. Someone who's a class clown or always agrees, overcompensating with laughter during conversations in an attempt to appease others. Self-isolating. Stops contacting friends for seemingly no reason due to feelings of inferiority or worthlessness. No motivation to make anything of themselves, believing they would only fail anyway. Allows themselves to be bullied. Usually hangs out with or dates people. Conspiracy theorist. Can't live without a sense of impending doom or will consciously find one. Extremely nervous when doing new things in front of others. So mature for their age equals didn't get to be a kid or teen. Total inability to accept compliments. No or very few distant friends as an adult. Barely any memory of childhood. No happy stories of childhood. Extremely negative self-talk. Story 3. Either isolated or poor choices in friends, unhealthy romantic relationships, unhealthy use of substances, low self-esteem, dependence on others for validation, poor self-regulation of emotions and behavior, easily heightened and or experience anxiety, no goals or lower than they could achieve and anything else and any combination of these. This was me for so many years. I was stuck in this rut for so much longer than I needed to be before I finally sought out help. My adult life was a car crash. For anyone in this situation currently, please do yourself the biggest favor in life and seek out a bit of help. I rue the lost years. Treatment for everyone is different. I happen to need medication, not everyone does, but getting yourself into talking therapy and learning coping skills is a game changer. I know money is tight for so many of us, but if there's any way you can tweak your budget to try to accommodate it, it's honestly the biggest gift you could ever give to yourself. I no longer have bad thoughts and I no longer feel worthless and utterly insignificant. My childhood still affects me, but I've managed to put most of it behind me, and I'm able to look ahead now, instead of always back. I have a lovely, steady job with prospects, and I've taken up a hobby, and the best thing is that I'm starting to feel like I'm worth something. And that is reflected in how people now treat me because I won't tolerate the kind of crap I used to tolerate from people, letting them walk all over me and use me. It's been a wonderful few years working on myself, and my only regret is that I didn't seek help out earlier in life. Story 4. The first lesson we learn in childhood is, how much am I worth? Our caregivers are the first to reflect this worth to us. From when we are infants and toddlers, if we cry, will someone come to us? If we fall down, will someone pick us up? To when we are kids and teenagers, do our caretakers choose to spend time with us? Do we get help with schoolwork or friend drama? There is an important balance here. As kids, we want to be taught that we are equally important as everyone else. Some kids are taught they're less important, and as adults, they may have a hard time asking for help. They think they're bothering someone when they have a problem. They may also prioritize the needs of others based on an underlying belief that other people are more important. Some kids are taught that they're more important than others, and therefore treat others poorly and have trouble learning empathy. They try to justify in their own minds where they're better, which can lead to some narcissistic type thinking or behavior. My best friend shared his story once. When he was in daycare, they had a stuffed koala that they were supposed to talk to if they had a problem, because the teachers didn't want to listen to them.
Hey, also, if you didn't know yet, me and a couple of my friends just launched Rufus rugs. Premium, custom, hand-tufted rugs. Maybe you're just a fan of Naruto and want to show it off. Or maybe you just love Pokemon and want buzz toys on display for everyone. Either way, we can make almost anything. So hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 5. Watch their table manners. Meals are forced contact time in bad households, and it can easily show. Some examples are becoming less talkative or withdrawn during meals. They realize their elbow's on the table and they jerk it away quickly. Or something innocuous like a sneeze at the table causes undue shame or embarrassment. Conversely, Someone who grew up without parental guidance can also develop odd eating habits. In the case of a coworker of mine, they collect the condiments near them. She would pull the ketchup bottle out of the little rack on the table, use it, and then keep it by her plate instead of putting it back. I asked if she was done with it, and she said, "Oh, sorry, I ate a lot of meals alone growing up." Turns out she grew up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs, and she was used to nobody being there to pass things. Story 6. Someone who can't figure out whether or not to permanently cut off contact with crappy parents, or who go back and forth, cutting off and trying again, and cutting off and trying again, even considering it means your childhood was crappy. And if you want to but can't do it, it properly means your childhood was X times crappier than that. To erode your sense of self and healthy boundaries to the point where you know what you have to do, but have been brainwashed by your oppressors to the point where you can't bring yourself to do it. Also thinking that achieving something their parents want will mean a happy relationship with them afterwards, as if their love was to be won over. Story 7. Insecurity. My psychology professor used to joke that psychology is the study of common sense. When someone is insecure, it is generally because they lack security as a child. Parental love was typically conditional and varied depending on the caretaker's mood. The child becomes insecure due to love not being guaranteed, so to earn this basic need, they will go throughout life trying to solve social puzzles that don't exist. Solving imaginary puzzles all the time can prove to be fatiguing, so these individuals tend to isolate themselves. It doesn't have to be caused by lack of parental love either. You can have a loving home but struggle socially in school and end up with a very similar result. Story 8. Attention seeking. I remember going to summer camp and meeting Milo. Milo is big on attention seeking and validation, and would take food from the cafeteria back to his bunk, like eggs and toast. I remember thinking he was just weird, but I think looking back, knowing what I know now, he was probably being neglected at home. Thin as a rail and probably malnourished, so he wanted as much food as he could get and just wanted someone to acknowledge him. Pretty sad stuff. Give Milo a break, he might just have the munchies. I actually have a small corner in my room for snacks just in case I get hungry. I also have a drawer in my desk with some emergency snacks too. Story 9. Everyone is different, but one that automatically raises a red flag for me and makes me extremely worried is when someone flinches for no reason. I wouldn't say it's for no reason, but I don't know what other words to use, so really sorry about that. Like you raise your voice slightly at them and they flinch, you raise your hands to grab something near them and they flinch, you look at them in a certain way and they flinch, you hug them and they flinch, etc. My old boss used to be like this. Seemed like a completely well-adjusted, healthy person, but if you startled her, she would jump out of her skin. We used to clamp down the hallway to make as much noise as possible before entering her office. Found out much later she had a dad who worked nights who used to rage and kept her walking on eggshells her entire childhood. This reminds me of my friend. He would always flinch when someone would move their hand towards him. Turns out his older brother kept hitting him in the nuts. Trauma. Story 10. Being extremely uncomfortable in other people's houses. My family was poor and we lived in a small house with a lot of stuff in it that was just piled all over the place. I refused to have people over because I was so embarrassed by it. Whenever I went to someone else's house, I could never relax and was always on edge because I felt like I was in a palace. The houses were 2 or 3 times or more the size of my house and were perfectly clean, coordinated, and decorated, like something out of a magazine. I was afraid to touch anything or sit on anything. I slowly learned that these people weren't royalty or interior designers. They were normal people living in normal houses. Those were homes that people lived in and slept in and ate in. Normal houses. My family was the one that was abnormal. I still ask permission to sit somewhere if I'm in someone else's home for the first time. I can't break that. When you visit my house for the first time, it's okay to ask. I wouldn't think that's too weird. But you know what would be weird though? If you don't hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Story 11. Constant analysis of nonverbal cues. I spent my childhood trying to read tiny signals that my oppressor sent that were imperceptible to most people, but big red flags to me. The problem comes when you assume that these signals apply to all people, not just the a-holes. I'm triggered by things that my gentle and loving partner does, because my oppressor sighed that way or tapped his hand that way, or got that glint in his eye. My partner is just trying to exist, and I read into everything that he unconsciously does. I also think it's depressing but unsurprising that that analysis is of course going to filter and red flag any and all behavior that can be perceived as negative, while really letting positive social cues fade into the background. I have friends, but I know I have always had a lot of trouble in the acquaintance phase of relationships because anytime I think I might be picking on a negative cue, it's an automatic signal to pull the chute in the damaged brain. It's hard for me to retrain my mind, but I'm working on it with a licensed counselor. I've spent nearly 4 decades of my life in fight or flight. It's good to be emerging from that mode. Story 12. Mine was when I would say to my wife, our kids won't have an upbringing like mine. I want them to have the best. I thought most people thought like this. Turns out, nope. When my kids were little, my mom would say, why do you go to the kids' sports day and the school play when they don't even remember it? I turned and said, oh, I remember every time you weren't there. which was easy because you only came once, and complained about how long the carol service was because you wanted to go out and get pissed. Sorry this is long-winded, I just needed to vent. What kind of mindset is that? If you can give your kids the best, give them everything you never had growing up. So hopefully one day they don't give you that Uno reverse card you gave your mom. Get owned. Story 13. If they subconsciously memorize the sound of everyone's footsteps, you can tell that someone has done this when they know you're nearby to ask for something without looking, or even around a corner or what have you, not just to identify family members' footsteps. That's pretty easy to do if you live with them a long time, but if they can readily identify everyone around them, even just coworkers based on their footsteps, at a minimum they've got some serious anxiety running in their brain 24/7, making them worry about who might that be and what might they want, so they've learned to discern who it is. When I was a kid, hearing my parents' footsteps equals hide. The amount of anxiety I felt in those moments was insane. I never knew I did this till people brought it up. I also know everyone smells like anyone I know. I can even tell when they're going to get sick or something is off depending on how it changes. Being hyper-aware constantly is draining and hard to stop even though you realize it. Story 14. Sometimes they feel emotionally distant. Like you can talk to them just fine and it seems like they're being open to you, but it feels like they're emotionally untouchable, as if they have walls and barriers put up, but are trying to hide it. They'll either be apathetic or grandiose to hide how they might be hurting. This is just in my case, but maybe because showing vulnerability in their family would just be used as ammunition against them in the next argument. They might keep you at arm's length at first, but once you get to know them and really connect with them, they'll practically hold you above all things, as if you are an essential part of their lives. Story 15. Being constantly afraid you're going to bother someone. If a friend is in a bad mood or acting differently for any reason, trying to think there's any possible way it could be your fault. Another one is being a people pleaser. Not always associated with issues during childhood, obviously, as sometimes people are just givers. But those who felt they were a disappointment as a child often engage in reassurance-seeking and approval-seeking behavior, manifesting as people-pleasing personality. Oh, and excessive apologizing. My mother growing up was emotionally unpredictable and you never knew what would set her off. It usually wasn't me, but you didn't want it to be you. I've just gone over my apologizing habit. I'm sorry to bother you. If I approached anyone, I'm still a pleaser. Are you Canadian by chance? Story 16. Asking permission to do really simple and mundane things is one that my friends have pointed out to me. Questions where the answer is always, yeah, obviously, or of course you don't need to ask to do that. Something like, hey, do you mind if I lean back on this wall? I'm just going to move a little bit closer to you. I hope that's all right. Can I tell a funny story, etc.? Giving a reason for doing anything. I'm just going to lean on here because it's more comfortable. I'm still listening to you. I'm going to the bathroom. I need to check my phone real quick. I'm just going to get my pen. It fell underneath my desk. Can't think of any better examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Not necessarily a sign of a rough childhood, but I usually say if a young child speaks and carries themselves like an adult, especially if they have younger siblings, it's because they've had to step up and be the parent when their parents couldn't. I've been called an old soul more times than I could count. Like, it's the depression actually, but thanks. Those are just the ones that have been pointed out to me by my friends and teachers. There's probably more, but I can't remember at the moment. It's early. Story 17. Speaking from personal experience, so my dad was an alcoholic. He beat me, my siblings, and my mom. He almost put an end to my sister at one point. My mom left him, and we spent maybe 3 to 4 years constantly on the run as he was always able to find out where we were. He even tried to burn our house down when I was 14. My sister held me back as my mom and her new partner barricaded the door. I even tried to climb out the top floor window to get to him, and had every intention of putting an end to him that night. Things were up and down with him, had good and bad days. I also have weird flashbacks of moments sitting in the dark with my mom holding me crying, and I was just scary calm. My mom's partner and my sister's significant other would constantly call me stupid when I suggested solutions to their problems, even if it turned out to be right. They'd also slap me on the back of the head if I irritated them. If I'd been wrongfully accused of things and I proved my innocence, my mom's partner would shout at me because he told me to drop it. If I'm doing something and I want to do it right, one of their partners would force me to drop it or take shortcuts out of impatience. My siblings have wronged me and have resulted in feuds, and I grew up with really crappy friends. But I'm trying to keep this post as short as possible, so I'll leave it at that. If anyone hits the back of my head, I go into a state of rage. It physically hurts me to hold back, mostly chest pain. I have zero confidence, but I am gradually getting better. I struggle to trust people. I trust other animals more than my own species. At least I know where I stand with them. Slight paranoia. If I hear part of a conversation or if people stop talking when I enter a room, I'll instantly think it was about me. But I've also had conversations that ended just as people have walked in. It's just a coincidence. Quick temper. I have more control now. Originally, I would be quick to hit people as a kid, but then I tried bottling it up as a teen. Except when I blew, I would throw or punch objects or be verbally. One time I punched a metal fence and broke my hand. It was hit that or the person. I tried to be more open by verbally expressing my feelings, but this quickly turned to verbal in the heat of the moment. Anger for me has always been uncontrollable. I don't know what I've done or will do until I've done it. The only thing that works is learning a new way to redirect it, but I find redirecting hard. It took me a long time to turn physical into verbal, and I feel that's just as bad. But I'm always apologetic unless someone genuinely deserved that reaction, which is rare. I admit guilt when I am guilty, but I'm also quick to temper when accused of the wrong. I once smashed my phone because people didn't believe me. Anxiety would be another one. I'm also a comfort eater. Zero motivation or focus. I struggle to do things, even things I enjoy. But I always have to keep my mind active, otherwise I will overthink, which for me is bad. That's true. Some animals are a lot better companions than humans. Get a dog. You'll never feel alone again, but your slippers might get chewed up. Just a heads up. Story 18. Overcompensation is what I'd say. Someone who had a rough childhood is paranoid that the future years don't follow the same suit. This can be both good and bad, depending on the intellectual and emotional stability of the individual. Such people can either be too much into seeking validation from others, proving themselves to others, or way too hardworking in their craft, and want to excel in their vocation as they know that people are full of crap. Although common traits in both types are wanting to be lonely and not staying in very active or budding groups for a long time, generally, a rough childhood leaves a scar on an individual's mental health, which can only be recovered by compromise between one's ego and the force of time. Some telltale signs. Introversion, few friends, tendency to stay in small groups or no group at all, over-obliging. If focused in career or hobby, then very hardworking. Difficulties communicating with the opposite gender, specifically for men. Substance abuse, seeking motivation from external sources, such as their own success or success of others, and deep mistrust for others. If you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sure you'd be interested in, what's the saddest thing to hear? It's okay, I'm used to it. As a response, story 4 would break your heart. I'll see you there.